Welcome to this Mastery Empowerment course from New Earth One Network. This is designed exclusively for your higher self connection and embodiment. Welcome to this Mastery Empowerment course. This is an introduction to a larger course that we'll be talking about how to create your ideal life and highest reality. Egan Sanders is here with us, and he is a beautiful spiritual teacher who will share more on the energetics of what we're talking about today. Hi, Egan. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you for having me on again. I appreciate it.
This is wonderful. We would like to know how we really become magnetic to create an ideal life and our highest reality. What is this course about?
It seems like on the planet, there's so many changes that are happening now, just with the population and the culture. And so when we used to hear these prophecies about the age of Aquarius and like a new Earth, one, and like a change in the reality, we weren't really given a lot of information always about how to incorporate that, how to make that real. There's a big difference between a theory about something and the reality of it. I remember watching years ago these like little films about like what the future is going to be like, and they say, well, you'll talk to people on your computer and you'll put a package in a microwave and out will come a 10-course meal. They have these like things that were very like theoretical, but like how do you actually do that? So I have found that in general, to create your ideal life and like the highest reality you can live, you have to work with your beliefs, you have to work with your emotions, you have to change your consciousness so that you can actualize the idea that you have in your mind to the actual reality you're living. And so there's a kind of a science to that, and an art to that, which I've kind of talked about in some of my past classes, but this is more about how to really make your greatest dreams and the highest reality you can imagine to actually live it.
Yes, and so is that vibrational then? It's really being in a vibration.
How do you get into that vibration? And so for the people listening, I think you know a little bit of my story. I was living in Colorado a couple of years ago before the virus, and I came to a point probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm like, my life is pretty good, but I want to be doing more. I think that there's more I can be experiencing. And so I went through this period where for a couple of months, I was really doing all these consciousness exercises, working with visualization and energy and saying, okay, I really want to, stretch myself. What can I really experience? And so an odd thing happened is that in a few months, my next door neighbor got murdered by his roommate. I was living in an apartment complex, and I was like, whoa, which said to me, okay, I got to get out of here. I've got to like move somewhere else. A friend of mine said, hey, I've got an empty house. I want to like sell it. Why don't you come and live here? So I moved into this 4,000 square foot home, rent free. I was like, okay. And it was in a nice neighborhood. I'm like, okay, this is good. And then I helped him sell it for like $1 million. And then he said, hey, you did such a great job. Here's some money. So I ended up moving to Florida. So in a strange way, I put out all this energy. And what I was asking for at that point was, and this was not in every area of my life, but I was saying, all my bills are paid in full, which means I'm out of debt, got a brand new car, ideal living space, and a surplus of money. And all of a sudden that happened. And as that was coming and all that money came to me, I said, I want to live in a different place. I don't feel like Colorado agrees with me. And I was guided to a location astrologer. And so she said, well, you can live here, here, here. And I said, oh, Florida, I've lived there before. Why don't I go to Jacksonville? And so I ended up. And so basically within 6 months of doing a lot of heavy energetic work, I was living in a very different reality. I was living in a nice community, a nice living space. The climate was different. It was just more agreeable to me. So I'm kind of like living in my ideal life and highest reality now. Whereas if it had been 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said some things were good, but some things felt off. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get to in the workshop, is where some people have certain parts of their lives which are working very well, but some things don't quite fit right. And then how to get those other parts like in resonance with something that's more ideal and something that really honors you. So that's kind of how I did it for myself. And that's really what I want to show other people, is how to shift into that other type of reality.
Yeah, I will think that that's a popular topic. People are feeling stuck or maybe resistant to change,
Oh,
but
yeah.
yet wanting change, wanting to bust through it. So was there, when you shifted your vibration, what was that like then for you? Because it seemed like it could be really dark, but you didn't give up. What exactly did you do?
It's kind of a strange process. I'm about to start doing YouTube videos. I've been thinking about different topics. And one of the things you'll often see on the internet is people say, hey, just do this technique and 5 minutes later, you're going to have, your soulmate or $1 million. And I always think going, for some people that could happen, but usually it's a process of growth and really changing your consciousness. So for me, usually there's like a cycle that you go through. So the first part of the cycle is you feel like I'm discontent. Something feels off. And so you say, okay, something feels discontent, something feels off. What can that be? What do I need to, look at? What's kind of like being pointed out to me here? And so you kind of go through this feeling of discomfort. And then as you kind of say, yeah, this is kind of what I have that doesn't feel quite right. What would I like differently? And then you're sort of more into like goal setting and saying, okay, what would be ideal? And that's more like clarifying a goal, kind of what I do with my attracted board game, where I say set a goal and say, okay, well, here's the goal. Then what comes up is your beliefs around that. Some people will say, well, like even to be financially independent and free, people say, well, I would like that. But then their mind goes, well, that's not possible, or not many people can do that. Or so you have to kind of deal with the beliefs and emotions and the conditioning and how to clear all that. So then you go through that phase, and then there's timing. So, which means that you can have a clear goal, know it feels off, have a clear goal, have shifted your energy, and then the universe has to sort of catch up with that. So in my case, I had done the energy work, I was clear, and then I was like, all right, well, there's nothing for me to do at this moment. And then all of a sudden, I was swept up in this whole thing where I just moved very quickly. And then I was like, oh, I have part of this now. And I went through many changes. So there's a timing and how it manifests that we don't control. We can ask for it, and then it's sort of delivered. So then there's like a patience, a trusting your timing, a surrendering, if you will, to that process. And when you ask for something really big, some people ask, they want their total lives changed. You just have to go through a certain amount of emotional change and mental change and lifestyle change to make that a reality. So it's a process. It's not always clean. It can be messy at times. It can be disruptive. But unless you go through that, you won't be like given the motivation to really make the change. Or you'll think that's a nice idea, but you never really do it exactly.
Yeah, I love how you said that there. First, we have to look and see where there's discontent, where we've had enough, and we're willing to make those changes to shift the vibration. Yes. And so I like it because it's really steering our consciousness and taking charge, being in the driver's seat, as we like to say. And so, it's kind of crazy out there. It can seem crazy out there if we're paying attention to the news, and that could give people some despair. So what is a daily practice that you do to keep yourself aligned and centered? Can you share a little bit on that?
I'm going to go more deeper into the longer class, but in general, there's just a couple of key tips. One is whenever you're watching TV or the news, you get it through Google or whatever your news source or Facebook or what have you, you have to kind of take things with a grain of salt. This interesting thing happened the other day. I was on YouTube and I saw an old news recording from like 50 years ago. It was one of the stations. I used to live in New York. And it was this thing that was on YouTube, and they showed like a news broadcast, probably from the 1970s. So it was way back. And so the newscaster's on there, and they're talking about all the problems and this and that. And I kind of realized that with the news, much has changed. They usually pick up the worst, awful things that are going on. You know this because you were in that field, in the media, and the awful things and these problems. But then in the future, they usually get resolved in some way. Something, there's a problem that gets resolved or something. So I was like, you know what, this has kind of always been like this. So when I'm looking at the news and the media, I kind of want to know what's going on. But at the same time, I also want to take that with a grain of salt. So for example, when you hear about some terrible thing, there's a robbery or people got shot. I mean, I had this happen to myself when I was, a couple of things happened. It was also a supermarket shooting that happened right around the time of the murder of my neighbor. And I was like, my roommate was in there at the time. It was like, it happened a mile from where I lived. 7 people got killed. But I realized that, okay, if you have somebody does something heinous, well, there's 350 million people in the United States. So if on a day, somebody or 5 people do bad things, you still have hundreds of million people who are just, spending time with their children, going to their jobs. They're not doing anything. So the thing is to look at the media take a grain of salt. I try to reduce it. So one of the things sometimes I would do is, it's very easy to get addicted to the phone. And so you get up in the morning, you're like, it's 5 o'clock. So you're like, let's see what's going on in the world. And you start like hitting the phone and you're like, after like 5 minutes, you feel like awful. You feel like you're terrified of what's going on. So one of the things I do is when I wake up in the morning, I don't immediately look at my phone. I get up, I do some type of meditation. I listen to like a recorded meditation, a guided meditation, or I do my own process for a good 20 or 30 minutes so that I'm sort of clearing the palette of my consciousness and not just going right into the mass conscious. Then if I look at the news or something, I'm already buffeted, I'm strengthened a little bit. So that's one thing. Another thing is knowing what your goals are, having a list. So when I give the example from a couple of years ago, I was like, all my bills are paid in full. I have a brand new car. I have my ideal living space. I have a surplus of money. So I just kept on like kind of repeating that in my mind, what it is that I want in my list, so to speak. And so that's, if you don't, we talk about programming, that we go onto TV to see a program, but if you're not careful, life will program you. So you have to remember to program yourself. And I had an insight about this is that, if you watch like YouTube or something, I have an ad blocker. So when I watch YouTube videos, I don't have to see all the ads. But if I watch it on my phone, the ads will come up because I don't have the ad blocker on there. But the way they do the ads now is that they're like 15 seconds. They're not even that long. They're like 10 or 15. And yet, in that 10 or 15 seconds, they convey so much emotion and visual images. And it's like, it really comes at you and it will stick with you. And I'm like, well, that is interesting. So throughout the day, I try to give myself my own ads. And I'll stop and I'll remind myself of what I want to manifest or what I want to feel. And I have different techniques for that. And so in a way, I'm giving myself my own little Google ads or YouTube ads, and I'm doing that. And if I do that, it'll tend to counter a lot of the negativity and keep me in that frequency, because reality is a frequency. If I can just kind of just keep on resonating with that frequency, that becomes my reality. And that's how to create your ideal life and highest reality. Keep on resonating with it on some level.
I love that. I do. Reality is a frequency. and we are always broadcasting a frequency.
Mm,
And it's really important to be able to catch ourselves or shift out of certain frequencies,
mm.
because we're the ones that are totally in charge. So wonderful. Thank you. We can read between the lines in the news and see the good
Mm.
things that are happening,
Sure.
because even in today's world, we can see the bias of even a headline in a newspaper. So it's just of how it's just taking our consciousness and creating fear. And so I love what you said about creating your own ads. Do your own ads for yourself, your own affirmations, your own vibrational check-ins that
Yeah.
keep us aligned with our goals and what it is that we want to bring into the world. So this is
Mm.
a course that you're going to be teaching. It'll be 2 hours.
Mhm.
Tell us more about what you're going to cover and what we can expect to learn.
Yeah, and just one point about there's an intentional community called Findhorn. I think it's
Yes.
in England or Scotland, it's one of those countries. And
Fair. Yes.
yeah, I knew a person who lived there, and what they said was like I think it was every half an hour, they would all stop, and then they would do something like they would share what their intentions were.
Ah,
So I thought that that was very interesting. So that was an interesting process. Um, so what we'll do in the workshop is we'll work on becoming magnetic to your ideal life and highest reality. So that's kind of shifting your energy. There'll be some tools that I'll talk about where, when we're sort of like feeling that mass consciousness energy, what's going on in the mass consciousness, how to navigate that and to say, okay, I know some mornings I wake up and I feel like something's like punching me in the stomach. And I know it's not me, it's like the mass conscious. Like on Monday mornings, you often notice that people are stressed out because they came from the weekend. And it's like, okay, it's Monday. All right, you got to get back to work. Kids got to get to school, whatever. And you can feel that pressure. By the time you get to Friday, people are like, Friday, the finish line. I don't have to, it's a much easier energy. So there's little tricks to understanding how that energy is out there and how to work with it during the week that help. Another interesting thing or kind of fun thing that we work with is the idea of time. So I know one of the other speakers does workshops, Dr. Bruce Goldberg, who did Past Lives, Future Lives. He did all these great classes. And I remember years ago reading in his book where he would project people into future lives, into past lives. He would regress them or project them, but he had like different frequencies of different variations of realities you could experience. And that always fascinated me. So one of the things I began to play with several years ago is I could project myself in time in the future. And actually, several years back, I was doing a class and we projected ourselves into the future. And I saw myself in a tropical environment, which is where I live now. So actually, I'd seen it many more years earlier. So we'll do a thing where people will get clear about what the ideal life and highest reality, and we'll project them in time, in the future, a year, 3 years, 5 years, several years, and see what that reality is like and see if there's messages from your future self. So that's kind of a fun experiential meditation to do. Another thing that comes up is that in our culture, we're often taught, you want to make something happen, you got to do it. You got to do it by yourself, and you got to figure it out, and you got to put your nose to the grindstone and all that. But there are all sorts of guides and angels and masters and beings and devas that will help you. So if you call upon those energies, you call upon your higher self or your soul or your divine self, you make it a lot easier. Subconsciously, we can think, well, I want to improve this area of my life, but I may not know how to do it. And you feel like, well, I'm this little being here in the universe, and I'm trying to, figure out how to get from here to there. And like, what am I going to do? Well, you can ask for help for that. You can call upon these beings and open up those energies, and that can make things much, much easier and much more enjoyable, And so there's an unlimited amount of love and support and guidance that you can get as you're trying to make these changes. Because if we just look at the outer realities, we're trying to make changes, we might say, well, I don't see how this is even possible. So what I often say to myself is, even though on the surface I don't see how I can make this a reality, I can create my reality in such a way where I can change my life. And so it's that constant thing of looking at the outer world and then saying, okay, well, I can do something differently. And then there are all sorts of other exercises that I do that we'll do in the workshop, which is simply how to vibrate with a different energy. So the idea is that, so somebody says, well, Egan, I want this change in my life. And I'll say, well, so how would you feel if you have it? And they'd say, well, I would feel more secure. So then I would say something like, well, can you feel the energy of security right now? And so they'll say, well, not really. And so then I try to get them into a state where they're feeling like, oh, I feel secure. Well, when you feel that energy now, you can become more magnetic to it. You can amplify it. So there's a whole art to taking an energy and then saying, oh, I'm feeling happy. And I'll say, okay, well, what if you doubled that? What if you made it infinite happiness? And so I stretch people, and that's almost like opening a doorway into a new reality. So why do we want new things in our lives? Because we want to feel something different. So you can do that now with your emotions and then open that door. And so that really was the trick for me, because there were things I want in my life and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. But when I opened myself up vibrationally to kind of feel those things, it was weird. The outer reality would begin to match that in ways that my mind, it couldn't understand. So that's the thing, is the mind only knows what it knows. It's programmed with certain things, and you have to have strategies to get beyond it, because otherwise you'll never get out of that loop of the mind of what you created in the past or what other people said that they can create. Because we're heading into an age now where we're going to create things that weren't really conceivable. I mean, they're going to go to other planets. One day Mars will have a whole society on. People say, well, they're Martians. They're people who are born on, like, well, that's crazy, but it's going to happen because we'll have the technology to go to other worlds. There's all these things now about UFOs now, where they're like, oh, the government's like, oh, there actually are UFOs. They're like, well, of course we know. And then, we'll have a technology one day where we won't have to have fossil fuels. We'll just, Tesla was able to transmit energy over thousands of miles, in the last century. So we'll have all these things, but unless you can conceptualize that, kind of vibrate with that reality, it'll be very weird, because you'll have people right now. So now we're talking on this, where you're thousands of miles away and we're talking, but there are people who are still living like they're in the Stone Ages. They have an oxen and they're working a farm or something. I mean, that's perfect for them. But other people are like on other planets, like are in spaceships and things like that. So we're opening up all these possibilities, but you have to have the consciousness to really let that in, so we can experience that fantastic reality of just technological marvels, but also like feeling states, feeling of safe, security, peace, tranquility, joy, safety. That's a big one that comes up, because a lot of people don't feel safe these days, because look at the outer world and they're like, well, there's all sorts of crazy things that are going on. Can I feel safe now? What would that kind of world look like, where we're all felt safe and loved?
Beautiful. Thank you. I love it. And actually, it makes so much sense as we vibrate to the reality we want to create. So we're reaching for the feelings, amplifying the feelings. And in your own life, you have illustrated and witnessed how your reality changed.
It's still changing. And so
yes,
the thing is, now becomes not can I create that, but what else can I do? What else can I create? How far can I stretch? Now, generally, people don't want to radically change their life overnight. And I wouldn't recommend that, by the way. I actually wouldn't recommend that, because what happens is, if you try to make a change too big, like let's say health. So at one point I'm like, if you say, I want to be healthy now. So like, I'm going to change my diet. I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do this. And what happens is for a couple of weeks, you'll be fine. And then you're like, I'm really tired of this diet. I'm really worn out from all the exercise. And what would have been better was a more moderate approach of saying, I'll make a little change here, a little change there. But for people who really are in a difficult situation, I was in a challenging situation, saying, I got to really make a change here. you can make those incremental changes, and so that it feels natural, and that you don't create the reality, more like you grow into it. And one of the ways you grow into it is with the feelings and visioning and the beliefs. And then it feels like it's natural, then it sticks. Because what can happen is that you can say, I want money, and then you do all these things, and a bunch of money comes to you, and it comes right in and then goes right out because you manifest all the money. And you're like, okay, well, now I'll manifest money where I'm always abundant, where I always have, or I'm always being loved in relationship, or I'm always healthy. Then you'll find that the reality will change where, maybe you just live in a healthier neighborhood, or the air is cleaner. The reality changes in ways that make sense. And you don't have to go on this superhuman regimen, where you try to change your diet and everything, because I've done these things. I'm like, okay, now I got to go back. But those are all learning lessons. So you want to do it gradually, although at the same time, you can really have a dramatic thing overnight. But my experience has been that usually that overnight change is because over time you were making the changes little by little, and then it just kind of reached like a threshold, a point where then it all settled in. It's like, oh, well, now this is my life. I'm healthy, or I have money, or I have a loving relationship, or I'm, have a balanced spiritual life, and because I've conditioned myself. So it's both of those things. That's the paradox of reality creation. You can make a radical change in a moment, and I've done that. But typically we have habits and patterns and grooves that we work in, and even though I'm devoted to transformation, sometimes I've been resistant, like I'm resistant. I'm like, I want this. And then like parties are like, well, I don't want to change. And then you have to you're in this battle here. So learning how to work with that resistance is part of the art of this. And that's like the mature way of creating a reality. Otherwise, these get rich quick schemes, or you're gonna meet your soulmate and lose 20 pounds and become a billionaire, overnight, all those things usually doesn't stick. Like when people win the lottery, they win a lot of, and they win the lottery, and then all the money, like a year later, all the money is gone because they didn't have a prosperity consciousness. So we have to develop almost like an ecstatic consciousness, an ideal life, and highest reality consciousness. Like, what is that like? How can I change my consciousness so I can match up with that? And so it becomes like, oh, this is like normal. This is like natural. This is like the way, it almost feels like it's the way it always was. And so what reality feels like now, I'm like, oh, because I forgot all the stuff that happened in the past. I'm like, oh, this is my reality now. It always was kind of this good, and you forget the stuff that happened in the past that wasn't that great.
That's comforting. Yes, awesome.
Mhm.
So who is this course good for? Who's it ideal for?
If somebody wants to change one particular life area, it's very effective for that, because they can go in with a goal and say, okay, I want to shift this one area, and then apply all the processes. That's usually how I do the workshops. I say, come in with a goal or something. I've had people want to change several things. That would be fine. Basically, people who have a healthy discontent. If there's something that they're just like really unhappy with, and they're like, you know what, and I've tried this and I've tried that, it hasn't worked. I went around that loop for a long time, because first I worked on the mental plan. I'm like, well, I have this, but I want that. But that wasn't enough. And then I would kind of work on the emotions and that, or then maybe I wouldn't take actions, So it's good for people who maybe have tried other approaches that haven't quite worked, or people who've had a certain amount of success, but kind of want to take it to the next level. That's kind of what I'm working on right now. Is I manifest a certain amount of things, and I'm like, all right, but what's that next level? What's that next thing? The funny thing about reality creation is that if somebody has a need and they get it met, like, like I have debt, now I don't have debt. Then as soon as they're out of debt, they're like, all right, well, now what? Now I want more money, or I want to. So it's kind of a funny thing. We go through this cycle, this constant game of, I created this. Okay, I wanted this. I created it. And I was like, all right, well, that was last week. Now I want to. So people who kind of like want to go to that next level of prosperity or relationship or enlightenment or health. And some people who just want to make a massive change, because I was surprised. I had mentors, but I was kind of just figuring these things out. I would take things out of books or things I'd used in the past, and I would kind of mix and match things. I didn't really know. But after several years, especially creating my board game, Attracted, I was like, oh, this really worked really well. This was a nice idea. This was a good theory, but this really worked well, because some of the things that we see in the law of attraction are often promoted, like visualization. I'm not really great at visualization. People say, well, just visualize your goal. I just can't do it. I can't every day. I can't visualize the same thing. So that doesn't work for me. But if you tell me to repeat a phrase or to do it in a different way, that will work for me. So people, this is good for if they need like a new technique or a different approach or trying to customize something for themselves. And usually in the class, people will say, oh, this was what Egan said here was good and that was good. But when he said this, I knew that worked for me perfectly. And so they'll come away with something that, because you need a technique, you need a tool. It's like driving a car. If you don't know how to drive a car, it doesn't matter, that you own a car or you're going. If you don't know how to, and there are bad drivers out there, we know this, who don't signal. But if you don't know how to drive that car, you're not going to do a good job of it. And I find that's like a lot with the reality creation is that if you don't really have a good, reliable technique, approach or a style to it, it becomes like a burden. It doesn't become a fun thing to do, and it doesn't quite work the way you want to. So the class is good for people who really want to fine tune, say, what's a technique I can really take away and really apply, and then they can use forever and ever and ever.
Yes, life-changing, beautiful, very powerful. So it's best for people to come with an intention, to come with a goal or a plan or an idea.
Yeah,
something to create.
Something, yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be a whole thing written down, and we can refine that in the workshop. But it's a big concept, your ideal life and highest reality. I've really pondered that for 20 years, and I first heard the concept. I read it like in a book, and I was like, my ideal life and highest reality. And I was like, what would that be? You get all these like magnificent ideas, but actually years later, I'm like, actually a lot of those things did manifest for me in ways that were surprising. So I'm like, oh, I guess I can do this. But it stretches the imagination because a lot of people usually live in a very narrow world with what they want to manifest. And so it's always that goal of like, okay, we'll just open up. The universe just wants to give you all these great things, but we're so like conditioned. And so it's breaking the conditioning. So that's a big part of the workshop too, is how to break that conditioning so that you're not bound by the paradigms and illusions of other people, because most people just want you to do what they want you to do. They don't want you to be happy. They want you to have the mortgage for the rest of your life and be in debt, or, be an unhappy marriage like they are, they don't always want the best things for you. So you have to learn to say, well, that's what you're creating. That's fine. And, but what do I want? What makes sense for me? And anything really is possible, I found. And that's what makes it interesting. You can really create anything you want.
We know people are ready to really create anything that we want. And one of the things that we've always been saying is keep your vision, keep your eyes on new earth, keep your vision of new earth. And what is that? As we hold that vision of new earth and what we would be doing in it, it will come about. We will be presented with the right steps to take, the people to meet, the collaboration, all of it. So it really is powerful work. And it starts one person, one heart at a time. So the work that you're doing to help people with this is really appreciated. And I know people are excited to join you for this course. Is there anything else you'd like to share about it?
I think there's more information on the website, but I guess there's a French proverb that I would like to leave people with, which is, I read nest. Little by little, the bird builds its nest. And so that's the way. So you think about what a bird builds a nest with, usually picks up twigs or, sticks, and then, but to build a nest, you need a lot of different pieces. So that's what really we're going to do in the workshop, is we're going to just use little pieces to build that little comfortable nest. The reality, your ideal life and highest reality is like a nest that you're trying to create that can feel like comfortable for you. And little by little, if we add some things from here and from there and, all together, it'll all come together. But, it's a gradual process, but you have to start somewhere. And this is a good way to, sort of supercharge whatever change you want to make and to supercharge it so you can build that little nest of that ideal life and highest reality. So I look forward, to doing the workshop.
We look forward to that as well. And we look forward to becoming magnetic for our reality. We're going to go over those techniques and tools for people, along with a meditation to see your future self. So it sounds wonderful. And what a beautiful teacher you are. Again, you
Thank you.
created the board game, Attract It. And it's all about the art of attraction.
There it
Yeah.
is. I'm trying to point, look in the camera, I'm pointing to my little game, yeah, attractive.
So, I mean, what a beautiful experience to join you, creator of the Attract It board game and manifestation tools, attraction tools that have worked in your life and
Yeah.
you're sharing with everyone.
Mm.
We're excited, and you're a beautiful guide for everyone. So thank
Thank
you.
you. Well, thank you, Lauren. Thank you for having me on. And yeah, I appreciate New Earth One. And it's my year anniversary. So I've done a whole bunch of classes, and I've been almost a year, because it was about a year ago that I started. So thank you for having the website and all the wonderful teachers and teachings. And it's that's part of building the nest on a global consciousness, is that all those wonderful teachings. So thank you for having all these wonderful opportunities for people to present and also to attend and engage. So thank you.
Ah, beautiful. Well, that too came from a goal working in this process.
Mm.
That's where it was a vision
Mm.
and helped me transcend the lower frequencies of competition. And I
Mm.
realized, wow, if we can just do anything without any restrictions, this is what we can build. And so this is what we hope for all of us as we build New Earth from a heart-centered place.
Wonderful.
This is the mechanics of how it works, and we're excited to join you. So if you'd like to join Egan in this program, the link is right here on this webpage, and you can sign up. It's very affordable and fun. And so we invite you to check it out. Thank you, Egan. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.